Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Apocalypse Podcast. My name is Kyle, one of your co-hosts. I got my brother with me.
His name is Taylor, and that is me.
That is correct. Today, we're doing a film podcast. It's a little early, typically, or earlier for what we typically do. So pardon me if I'm
A boring piece of shit.
sounding a little tired or something. Yeah, if I sound like a piece of shit, it's because it's because I just woke up. Today we're talking about The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the 2013 film by David Fincher, the American remake. God, I hope it's 2013. I went off by memory there. I think it is.
It is roughly that time. I'll double check.
No, it's 2011. Fucking hell, man. I always... I don't know why I
this
confuse
is a
those
dead
two.
podcast. Can't record the rest of this.
All right, yeah, well, go ahead and cancel.
Psych.
God, I'm an
not
idiot.
doing that. Idiot.
Moron. Okay, so yeah, the 2011 American remake of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by David Fincher. A bit of a weird one, but this is what I was mentioning prior to us starting, Taylor, is that this is actually one of my all-time favorite movies, as well as Lauren's.
What?
It's pretty unexpected that it's like this, but we absolutely love this movie, and we watch it honestly like once a year. I don't know why, but
fuck?
I know,
no
and it's
idea.
so exactly, yeah, and it's a really, really intense movie too.
I'm gonna love to bring up some stuff and pick your brain because I'm really curious. I didn't dislike it, to be clear. I know it kind of sounds like I'm on the opposite end, but it's the intensity in which you like it that is like, oh, I'd love to hear what is it that makes it like we watch it every year type of movie.
Yeah,
That's really surprising.
I mean, it's not like a ceremony or an anniversary or anything, but we just
watch it.
Lauren and I usually both get a kind of a hankering to watch it. The reason is that it's somehow a comfy movie for us, and what we've realized is David Fincher, the way he makes movies, they're like, how do I word this? They're basically, his movies usually feel like exaggerated versions of our real world, right?
Yeah.
Not like maybe The Social Network. The Social Network is pretty grounded, but something like this, or something like the movie Seven specifically, Lauren has talked about many times, being that she finds it a comforting movie, even though it's, it's Seven. It's like,
I need to check in on Lauren. I don't know if she's doing okay.
Well, no, because it's like a real thing, because I kind of felt the same way. And after discussing it with her, we realized that the reason it's kind of comfy is because it's such an exaggerated, extreme version of real life. Like, the movie Seven it is grounded, but it is absolutely not like real life, if that makes sense.
I mean, there's no one like killing people the way that like the murderer does in Seven, and is like got this perfect orchestrated plan, and yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and like the oppressive atmosphere of Seven,
yeah, that's
and
Chicago.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Like, it's like, just to talk about Seven for a second, the Chicago in Seven feels like an antagonist. It is constantly.
Well, it's not Chicago.
Oh, it's not?
It is a nameless city.
I never swore. That's crazy. It makes more sense that it's nameless, to be honest.
Yeah, they tried hard to make it specifically not
anywhere in particular.
Yes, I can't think of words right now because my brain is still asleep. But yeah, it could be LA in certain shots, and then in other shots it's kind of New Yorky, and then in others it's sort of Chicago-y. Yeah,
I'll be honest, it's the train that made me think it was Illinois, just because the way the L is so goddamn loud that I just assumed.
Yeah, and like right next to an apartment building window,
and New York is known for subways more than trains, so like to me that was like the only area that made sense. But I do think that's a good point. It actually does make a lot. It makes sense with the murderer being John Doe. Like, it just kind of all lines up with this, like, it's anywhere type.
So yeah, the movies that David Fincher makes, they're heightened realities, and they're exaggerated, and it makes them extreme, and somehow there's a comfort in that. I don't know.
All right, and this is coming from someone who watches almost exclusively thriller, horror, violent movies. So like the bit being like, "Oh, is she okay?" is like, my comfort movies are like also horror movies. So like, what does it matter?
Right. So bring it back then and talk about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, since that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
How about you?
Okay, first, I guess I was gonna say what is your star rating, but I'm gonna guess somewhere in the 4.5, 5. I don't know where exactly, but if it's good enough to be watched repeatedly, it's got to be at least a 4.
It is indeed a 5.
Okay.
We like it a lot. I say we because I'm just now speaking for Lauren at this point. This is going to be a tripod here. Lauren has joined us in spirit. I have declared that this is my favorite Christmas movie because it starts. I don't know if you know this. I think the first day in the movie when it starts is Christmas and it ends on Christmas Day as well. So to me, that makes it a Christmas movie, and this is my favorite. It's
as Christmas movie as everyone who claims Die Hard is one. So
right, yeah. The fact that it is adjacent to Christmas means it's a Christmas movie. So that's how I feel about this one. It's my cozy Christmas movie.
Even before that, before we can talk about the movie, can I talk to you about the fact that the opening credits is like a premiere television show, like Game of Thrones, or like a music video?
Cool. Yeah, and David Fincher loves those.
Yeah, and I was like, was this a style at the time, or was this a David Fincher thing? Like, I was just like kind of like a little shocked of like, this is just what every TV show's intro is now, but I'm watching a movie instead. And I was just
except it's way cooler because it's like all inky and weird, and it's got a great song by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and
Karen O on vocal. Yeah, I actually have that version of the Immigrant Song is one I'll actually listen to. I will not listen to the original because who fucking cares about old bands? Right?
Yeah, sorry
to Brianna specifically because she loves Led Zeppelin.
I bet.
Like, oh boy.
I mean that's supposed to be a classic. I'm the same way. I always refer to that era of rock as butt rock. It's just listening. The modern era of music, if you're into modern music and you listen back to that stuff, to me, and this is probably people are ripping their hair out listening to this, it just sounds so simple and stupid. Like I just can't listen to it.
Yeah, I have been convinced that Led Zeppelin's a little bit more interesting than but AC/DC and Rolling Stones, all that's all butt rock. I've been I didn't realize how much into Lord of the Rings they are. Like, that's why Led Zeppelin, in a lot of ways, I'm like, okay,
they're super cool then. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, speaking of butt rock, that was just I had to, once again, share with Brianna that, like, Nine Inch Nails is the soundtrack. That's why it's so weird and cool. And I was like, this movie looks like a David Fincher movie. There's something about the color grading.
Yeah, the filters.
The shots. And the music that just are everything. Like, there's a certain year that he kind of figured out oh, this is really good. Like I nailed this. That it starts to be kind of like you can tell he's touched the project in some way. Even his show Mindhunter kind of has that similar energy. So I just think that was a cool thing. Is I think I'm excited to see the Fincher stuff. And I didn't get to say what I gave this movie, and I don't know, Kyle. I think it's I'm oscillating between a 3 and a 4, and I believe I can be convinced to go higher.
Oh, you always do.
Because it's there are some things that I'm just not sure what how I feel about it. So we'll talk about it as we get through it. But something that I wrote as a note about this movie, and I don't know if you want to go kind of chronologically, and I'll bring it up when it comes relevant, but I didn't realize how much of this movie is research, but edited in a way that makes it look like this is really exciting.
Right? Yeah.
That was something I was like, how is this 30 minutes of footage of them in libraries? And
yeah, it's just it's just like The Social Network. The concept should not be exciting, and it's a genuinely rousing movie to watch. The Social Network, just a nerd starting a website. It shouldn't be exciting, and it is. It's just that's the David Fincher magic. He just knows how to make uninteresting things interesting, and
the pacing in this is just so ridiculous. In a good way, sorry. I bring up that it's 30 minutes of research because it doesn't feel like I've watched 30 minutes of research. It was just I think they're doing this type of, it just dawned on me that oh wow, they've been getting away with doing this, and I'm fully engaged. The movie was 2 hours and 40 minutes, give or take. And when I saw that, I was like, I don't know,
not that long.
Look it up.
Really?
230 something.
Oh, 158 minutes, 160 minutes. Wow, yeah,
Yep.
2 hours
See?
40.
And
then, okay.
It didn't feel
It
like
doesn't
it, but
feel
it
that,
is
no.
that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, and maybe we'll do this in order, but like I was really shocked at the 2 hour mark. What was happening? I was like, there's still 30 minutes of this movie left. Really?
Yeah.
So maybe we should do it in order because I think that
couple things,
this movie's important.
Okay, true. Agreed. One thing I wanted to say was the intro thing, just to remind you of Fight Club, if you remember how that movie starts with...
yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, he likes... Yeah, he likes these weird... I don't know what you call them, but the intros that you see for TV shows. Yeah, just like Game of Thrones. It's this
I feel like it's like a mood or theme, just trying to get you in like the headspace kind of like...
But he loves
energy.
them.
Yeah, no, I think that's... Good.
Something else I want to talk about Fincher's filmmaking. It's weird. I'm going to say some things that I feel like I've said before, but I don't think we've done a David Fincher movie on this podcast yet, have we?
No, we haven't, sadly.
Okay. So something that David Fincher is famous for is his unflinching camera. It's subtle, but it's that thing that if you don't notice it, it's the type of thing where you just go like, this feels like David Fincher, but I don't know why. It's the way he films. He never, and I shouldn't say never because he actually did, but he rarely ever uses any kind of shake in the camera. And that's what Mindhunter is too. He likes the camera to be basically like an objective third-party observer that does not give you mood or opinion. It just shows you what is there. And that's kind of how he feels about what the camera... It should be cold. It shouldn't have a personality. So that's how he films his movies. And it does quite a lot for creating a tone for a movie. It really does. And I mean, that's why all his movies are so dark, too. It contributes to that. But the one thing I will say is his most recent movie, The Killer, I'm pretty sure he did a shaky hand cam, and it was actually shocking because I noticed it immediately because of how out of character it is for him. There's some scene where like, Michael Fassbender's walking through a house with a gun drawn, and he's kind of like going up some steps and looking around, and there's deliberate shaky hand cam of somebody holding the camera and like walking up the steps with him. I was shocked. I was like, holy shit! I don't think I've ever seen that movement.
Yeah, I can't
in 2
imagine
decades
that.
of his movies.
Yeah.
Don't watch The Killer though. It's really I was very disappointed by it.
Look, if I want to see an action movie I haven't seen yet, I want to see Monkey Man. I forgot about that guy.
Oh man, that's a really fun movie. That's cool. It's like John Wick with more heart instead of just baiting us with a dead dog and being like, okay, that's his motivation. There's a lot more to it. I really liked Monkey Man.
Speaking of Monkey Men, Christmas Day. What I liked about this movie too is something that you love. I'm not surprised you gave this a 5 because this movie does not give a shit about holding your hand, or there's so many scenes without dialogue when you clearly understand what is being said, either by they'll look at something and there's a good. This is where acting matters. Is like they don't say what they're thinking, but I can feel either like where their head is at, or like I can sense this idea of like, this might be bad, or like I don't know what this means. I need to ask this person, or you know what I mean. But they don't say anything. There are so many scenes that are just like a shot that's like 2 minutes of Daniel Craig going into a room, looking at a thing, making a connection in his mind, grabbing it, leaving the room. He didn't say a single word, and it's quick. And there's just a lot of that. And I think that's what makes the pacing feel so good, is that every scene is so fast and keeps it always feels like there's a momentum. Once the movie kind of like starts walking and starts jogging, it then starts running. And then it kind of, towards the end of the movie, slows down. There's no like jerking. It never goes too fast or slows down too quickly. Like, I don't know how he does it, but when I talk about pacing, like this movie might be my favorite paced, like low. If you listed all the action, the excitement moments of this is a great book that I don't know how they turn into a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah. There's very few sort of actiony scenes, but as you've been saying, the pacing feels very good and you're pretty much engrossed and pulled in the entire time.
So actually, this is what I want to bring up, was that the girl with the dragon tattoo and the man with the nice sweater don't even interface until at least halfway, like an hour and a half into the movie. And like when you were seeing the like advertisements and posters, like they're both on the, like there's a sense of like these two work together way earlier than they do, but somehow the movie is able to present both of their like, I don't know, origin stories at the same time without feeling like one is cannibalizing the other. And I had no idea. Like I couldn't remember the way the movie played because I haven't seen it since like the theaters or something. Like it's been at least 10 years since I've seen this.
Yeah,
so I couldn't remember exactly how they overlapped their stories, but I was like, damn, that was like really smooth and like believable and earned.
Yeah, even Lauren and I, despite us having seen this movie 10 times, we remember, or we were reminded at how late into the movie they are actually introduced, Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara's characters. Yeah, you kind of forget, having, even on rewatch, that like, oh yeah, they don't actually work together until 30-45 minutes into the movie. I don't think it's an hour and a half. That's too extreme. Unless you actually timed it, I think it's like...
No, I paused and it was about an hour and change when...
Okay.
That it is more or less that Daniel Craig is like, I need an assistant. And that's where he's like, oh yeah, well, you could check in with the person we used to background check you on this case, and that's about an hour, at least an hour into the movie.
Yeah, so well, I guess that explains why the movie's over 2.5 hours long. But,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty surprising how late into the movie, but the A story and the B story, Mikkel's and Lisbeth's stories. They do a really good job of just kind of, like you said, doing their origin stories, covering what's happening to them, and it feels very natural. And their introduction and then their chemistry once they meet each other, it shouldn't exist, but it does. And I guess we can talk about that too. I don't even know if we need to go chronologically. I feel like we're just kind of spitballing here, and it's going decently.
Yeah. What I liked about it is that the movie opens up with your hero basically printing libel, losing in court to it. And like, so you have the lowest of the low for a journalist. That's the main character Daniel Craig plays.
Yeah.
And I think that's why like the idea that he's doing an investigative journalism thing is kind of like, oh, this must be serious and all that. And it's relevant towards the end of the movie too. But what I think is interesting is this movie definitely feels like they were designing it to have the other books made into movies, because if you thought you were only doing this one standalone thing, I think you would spend less time on Lisbeth's like mental state in terms of like the way the movie ends. To me is one of my things I really want to talk about, which is frustrating because that's at the end, because like I don't know how to feel about it, but they do spend a lot of time trying to establish her background without talking about it. Maybe that's just kind of fun, is to let you. But it just, in some ways, I felt like they were trying to set up the rest of the movies if this one did well.
Funnily enough, I kind of disagree. This movie, for sure, stands on its own. It is a really, really well-contained story. And if you don't know it's based on a book, if you don't know it's supposed to be a trilogy, you can watch this movie and be completely satisfied from there being a beginning, middle, and an end. You understand the characters, you understand their motivations, you get everything that happens.
Let me rephrase, because I agree with you.
I would love there to be more, but...
What I guess what I'm trying to say is I felt like they were planting seeds for the rest of the story to be told about her. Like, they talk enough about, like, what happened to her when she was a kid, that, like, I could see them doing that to then in, like, the future, like... I know it sounds like I'm basically saying, like, oh, this is not a self-contained story. It's the opposite. Like, I feel very satisfied. But at the same time, I could see, it felt like they were trying to lead into the next story pretty seamlessly. Like, I don't know. The way the movie ends and the amount of time they reference a thing that feels like they're going to touch upon it more, but they never touch upon it more when it comes to Lisbeth specifically. But at the same time, I could see it being interpreted as a stylistic choice of being like, oh, she's fucked up, but we're not going to tell you why. I don't know. I feel like in some ways it almost... I would go back and forth between like it feeling like a little, almost like a cheat code as to like, well, why is she so fucking crazy? Well, did you hear? She had a crazy childhood, and like not talk about any of it. I don't know. I'm somewhere in the middle on it. of like if I thought that was something I'd liked or not. I don't know.
Okay. So, yeah, I see. So you're almost saying that, a movie that isn't, I guess, because her past is pretty specific. It is detailed very specifically in this movie, and it has. I mean, it's The Girl Who Played with Fire, right? Is like the name of the.
And then Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. I think is the trilogy. I think the trilogy is the Dragon Girl. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So those are 3 books.
Yeah.
So it just felt like they wanted to tell us more in the story, but like this movie wasn't about exclusively that. It was like, hey, this character is interesting. We're going to follow her and learn more about her over time. That's the vibe I got. But then the movie kind of doesn't go too... You don't learn anything actually about her in her past other than the vague sense that she's a ward of the state. And like that being as young as she is and a ward of the state is such a like what the fuck happened, you know? But it might be that is the point, is that like, I don't know that she is supposed to have a detailed character, and I'm struggling to know which way I feel about that. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that's why I don't feel like a 5 out of 5 for me, because like I don't know how to. I wanted something different than that. I wanted them to go either more mysterious or more concrete. I feel like this one was a little bit too in the middle for me personally to like really go all in with Lisbeth, because it feels a little bit like a badass cheat code. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a more critical person than you are.
Right. Yeah. I guess I don't understand what the cheat code thing is, because like, as somebody who's watched this a bunch of times, maybe I have a bias towards it. But and to be clear, I did not expect this movie to hit me the way that it does. When I first watched it in theaters all those years ago, I really liked it. But I definitely didn't think like, oh, this will be my top 10 favorite movie. And then I found myself kind of having that feeling of like, man, I really want to rewatch that movie. And it did the David Fincher magic, and it pulled me in. And now this is just, as I've said, a mainstay movie in my rewatch catalog. And it's something about it just is so magnetic for me, and I absolutely fucking love it now. It's just an incredibly good thriller. Like we've been saying, technically on paper, boring shit is happening, and yet it's really exciting to watch. Love the chemistry of the main actors. Rooney Mara's performance is a standout, and I think she was completely snubbed.
Weird fucking. I think it's the first movie I ever seen her in, and like, what a weird character to be introduced to somebody as. You know what I mean? Like, Elizabeth Salander is a fucking weirdo, and like, she dissolves into that role. I forget what she looks like in any other project she's in. Like, this character, in the same way that Skarsgård in Nosferatu, like, I don't see that human being. I only see the performance. That's how I feel about Rooney Mara in this. Like, I just don't. This character's weird.
Yeah.
She commits to it in a way. Because actually, something I paused it at one point in this, about 30-ish minutes, and I said to Brianna, I was like, I don't think they could ever make this movie the way this movie was shot because of what happens to her. And I think it's tastefully done, but it is. And at the point, the David Fincher unblinking camera staring at it is like really hard to watch a couple of those scenes. Like,
yeah, this movie is brutal.
I thought I was one of the biggest things of like why I was so shocked about Lauren being like, oh, this is kind of my comfort thing, is like this movie to me is one of the darkest movies I've seen, because there's something about like how realistically that evil is done and how realistic it looks, and like it just makes my stomach churn thinking about it. I couldn't when she at first the sexual assault in the office is already like. The camera's just horrible. Like, we're sitting here the whole time, and it's shot so tastefully. I will call that out. Like, it is not indulging in the moment. It is, everyone is uncomfortable. Nobody wants to be watching this. So that's, I think, is really good, of like trying to get you in the emotional state. And I think the music helps a lot there. But when she gets raped, my fucking God, dude.
So, okay. Let's talk about the plot of the movie, because that's something we haven't covered.
Okay, you want to talk about the plot. I guess it's relevant.
The girl with the dragon tattoo, it's about, this movie specifically is about an old man, an old Swedish guy who owns this multi-billion-dollar estate because they have some production company in Sweden, and they basically like built the country from World War II times. But the family is extremely fractured because half of them are literal Nazis and were traitors to the country and supported the Nazi party, but the other half aren't. So there's, the daughter doesn't talk to the mother, but the mother doesn't talk to the brother, and the brother doesn't talk to the son, and like, all these people is a spider web of relationship.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like Glass Onion, not Glass Onion. The first Knives Out. The first Knives Out. Like, it feels so inspired by this story about like there being kind of Nazis, the family that hates each other, and they're rich, and they're so in fact, the old man that hires Daniel Craig in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is the old man that hires Daniel Craig in Knives Out to investigate his family.
Oh, that's funny.
So I just thought that was like, there's no way it's a coincidence.
So long-winded point. This family, the head of the family, his niece, who he loved very much. The head of the family, by the way, is a good guy. He's the one who started the company. He's the one who runs it. He's a super old man, 70s, 80s years old. But his niece disappeared 40 years ago. And she was a 16-year-old, and he really, really loved her, but she literally disappeared from this little island that they live on. There's a little bridge that connects the island. It's not like miles away. It's, probably a 300-foot bridge, or maybe like quarter-mile bridge. Anyways, they're trying to investigate this murder, and they have investigated it, of course, when it happened, or they assume it's a murder, I should clarify. They try to investigate it when it happens 40 years ago, but they get nowhere. So, bringing it back, for some reason, they decide to bring in Daniel Craig, who's Mikael Blomkvist. They decide to kind of like resurrect the case and have Daniel Craig's character, this disgraced journalist, investigate it. And Daniel Craig then eventually realizes, or I should say Mikael realizes he eventually needs an assistant, and that's where Lisbeth comes in. So then those two are effectively investigating this 40-year-old murder. The reason they bring in Mikael is because he just lost his job, right? So he's kind of like a disgraced and discredited and probably can't publish any more articles. People won't trust him or believe him because he was just, lambasted in court for libel and slander. And the head guy of this family is basically like, hey, you're an investigative journalist. You're good at investigating things. You're kind of like a detective. Like, what if I just bring this guy in for super cheap? He is smart. He is good at his job, other than, producing libel. Like, what if I get him to come in and try to see with fresh eyes and a different type of investigator? Instead of being a cop or a detective, he's a journalist. So maybe he'll have a kind of a fresh perspective and be able to solve this. And spoiler, he does, with Lisbeth's help. So that's the movie. It's just a murder investigation. And it's a weird group of people, a disgraced journalist, underground hacker, and a super, super rich businessman working together trying to figure out what happened to the businessman's niece 40 years ago. That's the whole plot of the movie in fucking 10 minutes or whatever I took. But
and I thought there was something I wanted to add, but no, that's basically it. Oh, and just that the old man promises that he, as part of the payment, was like, I have something money can't buy, and that's like dirt on the guy who got you the libel loss in court. Like, I have a way to prove that he set you up, that the information you posted was like insider information.
The information that Mikael posted was true, but he couldn't prove it. I believe.
No, so what it was, sort of the idea
he was set up with a fake tip.
Yes, that it was the person who gave him the tip worked for I can't think of Vernstrom, that's the name. Anyway, the guy who sued him, the tipper was working for the guy who sued him, intentionally giving Daniel Craig bad info.
Vennerstrom. Yeah, Hans Erik Vennerstrom.
Yeah, he got one of his employees to give Daniel Craig a bad tip. So then when he publishes this story, Werner Strom can be like, no, this is totally fake. See, look, he's printing lies about me, and that's how they.
But there was a specific line that Christopher Plummer's character, Henrik Wenger, that's his name. He specifically says something about like what you said was true, you just couldn't prove it. He says that line, and I thought he was referring to that info, but. Of course, it was a setup anyway, so I'm not sure.
So the idea is like whatever investigation he was doing was true, but the proof that was given to Daniel Craig wasn't the proof he was looking for. Right, it was
like a red herring or something. And
so you were correct. You were on the right trail, but you got led astray by this.
That's right.
That's the logic of it.
Okay, so... All right, so maybe that's a bit of a scattered brain setup for all this, but that's the story. It's just a murder investigation, a 40-year-old murder investigation thriller, which, you know, even that plot is like, if a guy got away with murder 40 years ago, well, they also set it up so that you think that Henrik is being taunted by the murderer because his niece used to send him little, like, freeze-dried and framed plants. You know, it was just kind of a cute little thing. She would take a little flower or a little whatever and put it in a frame and send it to him. She used to do that every year for her birthday. And since she was a little girl, so he had, you know, like a dozen of them. And then she died, but these framed plants keep coming in year after year. So he thinks he's being taunted by the murderer for 40 years. So... Yeah, it's like he's having a hard time letting it go because he keeps getting reminded of it year after year from this murderer sending this taunting message, effectively.
So I do like that the movie never, and it does also establish how, like, why they can't prove it was a murder was like, hey, there's only one way out of the island. No boats were taken. No one saw someone swimming in because there was a big car crash on the bridge. So she couldn't have left via car because, like, it was clogged up. Everyone was there and there was nobody in the water and no boats were taken. So they've kind of established, like, she disappeared. There's no way the one alleyway for her to escape had a million eyes on it and nobody saw her. So it is a mystery. So that's why some people are like, no, she ran away. Some people think she died. She's just gone. And like, they've accepted she kind of died because like, you don't vanish, right? You don't disappear.
Yeah, you can't vanish on this island. So they assume she was died and disposed of in a way where they just can't find her.
Yeah. And then it just kind of evolves from there, and there's I think it's paced out with enough, like, revelations and, like, new pieces of info. It does get tough to remember who's who if you just look at names, because these are these are all Swedish names, because it's out in Sweden. And, like, I just couldn't remember when they're doing some research in the library, and they're like, oh, this is a big breakthrough. I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't know who Martin was. Fuck, which one was Martin? And that kind of stuff. But I want to say what I loved was that all the people that were interviewed, I didn't feel like I had it's hard to forget that you know who the bad guy is once we've seen it once, but I certainly didn't feel that way until the information was revealed because, I don't know how you want to, if there's other things you want to talk about before. I'm a little scatterbrained myself.
A
lot of it is just, go ahead, sorry.
I do want to get to, I will call it the inciting incident, which is Lisbeth Salander being raped.
Yeah.
So, okay, what happens is Lisbeth Salander has a ward. He's this old guy. He's very sweet. They play chess together. Sort of almost as well giving you insight into Lisbeth Salander's personality. If she isn't being harassed or abused or targeted or whatever, you know, she has the capacity to be gentle and sweet and nice. And with her current ward, when the movie is starting, you can tell that she loves this guy. She you know, they have this sweet little thing. She visits his apartment and they play chess together, and he's the one that helps her out with her quote-unquote money, right? He's the one that's supposed to, you know, dole out her checks and make sure she spends responsibly and make sure she does this and that, but because they trust each other and he loves her, this is mostly implied. You don't see a lot of this, but it's implied and it's
based
earned.
On her reactions to it.
Yes. She basically has control over her own stuff because this guy understands that she was just raised, you know, as you said earlier, she just had a really shitty childhood, but given the chance, like, she can be trusted. She's a good person. However, this ward has a stroke, like, right away. And so she gets appointed a new ward of the state. Or no, she is the ward of the state. She gets appointed a new... I keep using words. I'm butchering this horribly. What is the name of the fucking guy who watches a ward of the state, or is like the guardian of one?
I feel like it's like a counselor of some kind, but I'm going to Google this while you're just explaining.
State appointed guardian. That's what it's called. So she has a state appointed guardian who she loves. This guy has a stroke. She gets a new state appointed guardian, and immediately bad vibes from this dude. He's asking her like really personal questions that he's saying are, you know, part of his job. He has to ask her if she has STDs and how many sexual partners she's had, when it's like,
and what if they've been with, if it's with men specifically? Yeah,
have you been with men or women, where it's like, that's completely irrelevant. So this dude immediately is giving you bad vibes. And of course, immediately he basically makes Lisbeth give him a blowjob in order to give her a check for money, for, you know, groceries or a laptop or whatever it needs to be. So immediately, you know, this guy's bad news. She needs a check, another check, and
her laptop broke because someone tried to rob her on the subway.
Yes, her laptop broke, which is an amazing scene. It's so quick. I love that scream that she does in the dude's face when she gets her laptop back. She's in the subway, and some guy just like tries to pull her bag away from her and starts running up the stairs, and she follows him up the escalator, and they basically have a little scuffle and a fight, and it's really, really loud because it's a subway, so you hear the incoming train is the overbearing sound. So you can't even really hear what's happening. It's very, very oppressive. But she eventually like gets her stuff back from this guy and screams in his face, and it's very intense. It's really cool. But her laptop breaks, so she goes, "Hey, I need money for a new laptop." And he's like, "All right, well, I'm not at work. I'm not at my office. You're gonna have to come to my house, and then I'll give you a check." And instead, he rapes her. He basically brings her to the bedroom. She sets down her bag on a chair, and she's like, "Am I gonna have to give you a blowjob every time I want some fucking money?" And he handcuffs her immediately, like, you know, kind of surprise attack. Handcuffs her to the bed, knocks her unconscious, and she wakes up and she's like sprawled out on all fours on top of the bed, tied to the, you know, the bedposts. And it is just it's a rape. He ends up like ripping off her clothes and anally raping her specifically, which is fucking horrible. To be clear,
while this is happening, Rooney Mara's level of fear and like freaking out is so raw and like believable.
It's very authentic. It's horrible.
So hard to watch.
Yeah. And what I will say is this movie, this is very much my type of movie. Number one, you mentioned it earlier about like the writing and stuff. Yeah, just respecting your audience and the very basics. Show, don't tell. That's good filmmaking. And a lot of people aren't good filmmakers, so they tell you because they don't respect the audience. They think they're idiots and won't get it. But like showing, don't telling is one of the most basic filmmaking principles, and this movie does that. I also want to shout out the writer of the movie, Steven Zalian. That's part of what makes this movie so good. He has an ability to write boring things into being exciting. Like, he wrote the movie Moneyball. I don't know if you've ever seen that with Brad Pitt.
I haven't seen it, but I know that it's very good.
It is, like, not only do I not give a fuck about sports, but like an entire movie about sports statistics? Like, this is the last movie I would watch, and I've seen the movie 3 or 4 times because it is so good. Shit. You should watch Moneyball. Honestly, it's a phenomenal movie. And that's Steven Zalian. He can write boring things into being not boring. I don't know how he does it, but it's amazing. So anyways, I was talking about respecting the audience and so this rape, right? This rape is horribly brutal, but this movie does something that I really, really, really fucking love, and it's fucking payback. It's vengeance, man. And it is so good.
You did like that.
What? What are you mumbling?
I said I figured that's exactly what you would want.
Yes.
You're a very vengeful guy. You love when people you love vengeance. I don't know.
I don't love vengeance, but like when somebody does something horrible, something deserves to be done back to them. It's justice. It's not even vengeance. It's fucking justice. And we talked about it in the Transformers movie, oddly enough, is this like, no, don't be bad, because then you'll be like them. And we're watching Buffy right now, and that shit comes up all the time. You can't do that, because then you'll be just like them. It's like, no, I'm not raping and killing indiscriminately. I'm doing it to the person who is the rapist or is the killer. Like, even in Invincible, the TV show. I don't know if you watched that. Great show. Invincible, very recently too, there's these horrible villains that are like murdering people, and one of the characters murders one of them, and they're like, you can't kill them, you're a hero, you can't be like them. And to me, that concept is so stupid, because they're not killing innocent people, they're killing the people that are doing the horrible deeds, making sure they never do them again.
Okay, so, hey Kyle, I want to challenge you on this.
Yeah.
Because I would agree with you that most of the time, the setup, I think that is a bad writing. That let's say a mass murderer is there and he cannot be stopped unless he's killed, and they're like, no, I won't do it. That's lazy. That's stupid. Yeah, but the message is supposed to be that it is a slippery slope to use the tools that were made you so angry and hurt onto others, because that would then inspire people who care about that person to be angry, and then it's. At some point, someone has to stop the violence and then do retribution, like justice in a different, like, punish the person. You don't have to cut their head off. You don't have to inflict, like torturous violence to enact justice. And I think that is what the message is trying to say, but most writers do this, like, where it's an evil alien whose culture doesn't align with yours, and they're going to kill everyone, and they're like, well, don't shoot him in the heart.
Let the justice system do its work. Yeah, which hilariously, you mentioned that. That's exactly what happens in Invincible. It's this pair of identical twins. They're these big blue.
I've seen the first season of Invincible, but that's it.
Yeah, so it's like these two super villains. They're super geniuses. They're insanely big and strong, and they have been quote unquote like killed multiple times, but they keep fucking coming back. And one of the characters kills the duo of them. He kills both of them. And they're like, you can't do that. And it's like, dude, we've literally not only killed them before already, but they keep coming back. We have tried to capture them, and they keep coming back. Like, what are we supposed to do? Yeah. So anyway.
I think that it's a hard thing to write well, but I have a problem with people just wanting, like, retribution instead of justice, because I don't think retribution is justice. That's just, you're getting revenge back. What is that going to make them stop? Like, in some cases, like, for example, in this movie, she has to continue to incite violence and fear to maintain her position of power. I'm not saying the guy doesn't deserve what happens to him. I'm just not saying that it didn't feel good, like, watching that guy get, like, physically tortured in the same way. Like, I guess that's why I think is an interesting thing that I've diverged from a lot of people with, I think, is that, like, I love that she had that blackmail, but, like, the physical torture to me makes me not root for your character, because she's just as gross and is enacting it on bad people. But, like, I don't know. I always just think that there's a level of sadism that's in these types of stories that separates the, like, wouldn't just the threat, just releasing that footage been enough to get her justice? I know, but she needs to extort it, right? And this movie, I'm not really lining up necessarily, but it's a podcast. I'm just talking to you about things that I think are interesting about, like, that trope is in a shit ton of movies. And I have a bone to pick with people who are like, oh, I hate when they don't just instantly kill them. It's like, well, I think sometimes it's interesting to point out that, like, it's a cycle, and, like, at some point you should break the cycle and do something new that's better, because obviously the old ways aren't working anymore. Just as a thought experiment that I think is, I think this movie, I get why this character does what she does. Like, she's not a lawful good character. So she's nothing to, like, feel bad about getting revenge on someone who wronged her individually. I just have a hard time thinking it was awesome while it was happening, because that shit was gross and like scary and like, I don't know, man. I was just really shocked at how brutal that was, and that he was alive afterwards, to be honest.
Right. So let's clarify what actually happened. So then, yeah, her state-appointed guardian rapes her. The significance of me saying setting down her bag on a chair earlier was that she has a little button camera in her bag, and so she set it up as blackmail, basically, to be like, hey, I'm going to release this footage, and, you know, you have to stop making me do this, because you're going to be fucked over if this happens, you know. Well, of course, this what she thought was going to be another blowjob turns into the rape. So, after he rapes her, he lets her go, and it's horrible. She's kind of limping home, ends up taking a shower, and she's like bleeding and stuff. It's really bad, and you can see how horribly it impacted her. But at the same time, she has this strength because you kind of just assume she's probably dealt with something like this before, despite how horrible that thought may be. She has done nothing but overcome adversity her entire life, so she is just incredibly strong, and you know, her physical appearance with the piercings and the crazy hair and the colors and her cold demeanor, you know, at one point her state appointed guardian, I can't remember his name, the rapist guy, Nils.
I don't know it either.
Nils, Nils, Bierman, whatever, Nils Bierman. He says something, you know, do you think that that thing through your eye makes you attractive? He says that, but the significance of that line is that it's actually the opposite. She does these things to repel people, but people, because it garners attention, you know, it makes people look at her and get kind of a confused message. But she does all this stuff to keep people away. But when you look at her, you can think like, oh wow, that girl is desperate for attention. But it's the opposite. You know, she's trying to get people to stop looking at her.
Bring up that something that I think was really cool about this movie was this. I picked up a very similar thing of like, I feel like her appearance is a front in a lot of ways of like, it doesn't really represent what she feels inside, because you see how warm and happy she is around Lundqvist, right? Like that relationship to her like really she was very quick to feel comfortable and safe and like kind of not be the character that she was kind of like portraying. And I just think that was a nice touch, because she never says anything about her feelings in the entire movie. The closest she ever gets is just talking about how she tried to set her dad on fire back when she was a kid, right? Yeah. That's like all you get, but like there's a lot of moments that you can see this, like, I don't know. That's what I think is really impactful about this, is there's so much portrayed without any spoken dialogue from her.
Correct. Showing, not telling. So, let's get this fucking rape over with. Holy shit. She gets her revenge on this guy basically as she returns to the apartment. She tases him to knock him unconscious. She drags him into the bedroom. She, like, you know, cuffs him up and basically drills him with, like, literal screwdriver, drills him into the floor so that he can't move, because this he's pretty huge. He's probably, like, 6 foot something and 250 pounds or more. Like, he's a huge dude. So she's really taking precautions to make sure he doesn't move. After he wakes up, you know, he's got duct tape over his mouth or he's gagged or whatever, and he can't really talk. He's freaking out, and she plays the videotape of him raping her. And she's basically like, you know, I thought it was just going to be another blowjob, but I didn't realize how fucking sick you actually are. So she's like, if something ever happens to me, you know, if I'm run over by a car, if you run me over with your car, I'm going to post this everywhere, and like your life is going to be ruined. Then she ends up shoving her own dildo in his ass and kicks it in there, which that part to me obviously is like, it makes me wince to see that.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that probably would have killed him. No joke. It would have like pierced his intestine,
I was
like he would have died.
And I think that was probably more of a dramatic effect. Yes, but like, I think about what that actually would do is like that is like and then like how her dad,
it was like a 12-inch long metal dildo, too. It wasn't some little thing. And she kicked it into him.
Because they show her kind of shove it up without, like, showing the metal object with a hand movements imply that she already did that, which is already, like, clearly going to fuck up. And then, like, she's wearing these boots, and you can tell that kick was with like punter's kick, dude.
Yeah,
and, like, that's where I was like, dude, this feels like a murder. Like, I don't know, like, but at the same time, it's like, but doesn't he deserve it? But I'm like, yeah. But I think that like maybe just inserting it was probably
I think the whole point of this is I think it appeases both audiences like me and you.
That's for sure.
It's like, even as someone like you who who stands on the side of slippery slope, don't do it because then you might become like them or other people might become like them. You can't help but feel like this guy absolutely deserves this.
Yeah, and that's the thing of what makes it complicated for me is that I don't feel bad for the individual because it's like you reaped what you sowed in a lot of ways of like you fucked with the wrong person, right? And that's now if you're talking about like would I have done that? I would have been like, no, this is way too fucking far. And I think that Lisbeth's the reason this movie, I think, is good writing is that I don't normally like when this trope is done this way, and I wasn't like, I think she should go to jail now. This is too far. Like, for me, it was like, dude, that might have been too far, but that's kind of what her, like, experience is, right? Is she's, like, just at the edge at all times, is, like, goes too far to try to, like, be antisocial. It almost feels, like, performative, like, I am the person you think I am. Like, she's like, I'm insane. You can say I'm insane. I know I am. And it's like, I don't think you are. This isn't what an insane person does. This was an angry person does.
Yeah, no, you know I mean, she's just trying to
be edgy in a weird way. Yeah, but that's why I think it works versus if she hadn't, like, I think they did a good job with the character.
Yeah. So here's the final thing that happens in that scene, right? She shows him the video. She puts the thing in the thing. Then she sits on top of him, like sits on his stomach, and she pulls out a tattoo gun, and she horribly and brutally scrawls into his chest. Obviously, the scene cuts; you don't see the whole thing, but she says, like, careful, I've never used one of these before. There will be blood. And then she starts, like, digging this tattoo gun into his chest. And it's revealed, the scene cuts. And then when it cuts back, he's unconscious on the floor again. And it says on his chest, I'm a rapist pig.
I'm a fucking racist pig.
No, it's
a rapist.
It says, I'm a rapist pig. That's what
I swear to God, it said fuck.
No,
that's why I thought it was so...
Her shirt...
that's what it was.
Says "fuck you, you fucking fuck" at one point, which I want that shirt. It's so good. It's such a good shirt. No,
I movie to tell Brian about that.
Yeah, fuck you, you fucking fuck. It's so funny. I want that T-shirt. I don't want the tattoo that says I'm a rapist pig. So that's what it says on his chest. That to me is like, okay, she could have just done that. She didn't have to kick a fucking dildo into his ass. But hey,
I almost
that's
feel
the
like
psycho sadist part of her. Is like,
yeah.
You do this to me, you know what? My whole life, I have had things done to me, haven't been able to do anything back to anyone. Like, fuck you. I'm not going to take this. I feel like that's almost to what was happening here is she's just been abused her entire life and probably never been able to do anything back to anyone. And she finally has the capacity to do so. Although I guess that's not true because she did set her dad on fire as a young child. So maybe she's always been like this.
Yeah, and that's enough mystery that you're not sure where the truth is, and you just kind of. But the actions make you believe, like, actually, I'm pretty sure that is true. She probably did do that.
Yeah. So this all happens like maybe half an hour into the movie, 45 minutes in. I like I said earlier, I call it the inciting incident. It is wild. It sets the tone for what all of these characters are capable of, what they're doing, what this movie is going to be about. Like, it is very, very, very intense, and it's hard to watch. And it also provides setup for her guarded nature later, because Mikael Blomkvist later, this is how they meet. Is basically Mikael says, I need an assistant because, he's starting to figure stuff out, but he doesn't quite have the means to do it. So they sent him back and they say, this is the girl that did a background check on you. It was an illegal background check because she hacked into his computer and did stuff that she wasn't legally allowed to do. But this is what the company that hired her to do. So they were doing illegal shit too, basically. What ends up happening, it's pretty subtle, but it sets the tone again for Mikael and Lisbeth's relationship. Most people in this movie who have met Lisbeth, they're commenting on her looks, they're commenting on her personality, they're walking on eggshells around her. All these characters they're treating her in the way that she's always been treated, and that's why she continues to perpetuate like the way that she is. Sort of a vicious cycle thing. And Mikael, when he meets her, disregards everything. He doesn't care what she looks like. He doesn't care about her piercings. He doesn't make comments on her personality. Nothing. He shows up to her apartment and he's like, "Hey, we need to talk." And he kind of like bursts into the apartment, not in a really intrusive way, but in a assertive way. And he's like, "Look, you illegally checked into my life. You know more about me than anyone else ever does. Like, what you did was massively illegal and wrong, and we got to talk about this." However, he's like, "I'm going to tell you a story, and if you don't like it, I'll leave, and you'll never see me again." So this is how he meets Lisbeth, in that he's just completely unfazed by her and her outward appearance. And immediately it almost sets her at ease. Like, she's still weary of this dude, but because he's probably the first person in the entire movie to just treat her like another fucking person, she's starting to let her guard down pretty quickly. And so what he ends up saying to her is, "I want you to help me catch a killer of women." And then the scene cuts and it goes into other stuff. But that's basically how his meeting with her in her apartment ends, is him. Oh, he also like brings her food and says like, "Hey, I want you to eat something." So this is kind of scatterbrained, but maybe you can like clean up what I'm trying to say. But basically, it's like he treated her like a normal person for the first time ever. Nobody else is doing that to her.
It is interesting how much of this movie is the kind of, the one person who treats this person with like humanity and respect gets an insane sidekick she's got superpowers basically.
Yeah.
She doesn't sleep and is able to find information on anyone and anything.
She has photographic memory.
Yeah, and that's what the other thing that I think is the other part that makes it not grounded is she is straight up a superhero. Like, she's inhuman in terms of like her efficiency, which is fine. I just think it's kind of interesting.
I don't know. People have photographic memories, and like the fact she was raped just in the movie, so like she's not really a superhero. But
what do you mean she's not a superhero because she got raped? I'm saying that she's got like an insane level of energy and able to research like super efficiently and gets all the info she needs. Has nothing to do with her physical strength. I agree she's not like super strong. I'm just saying that her ability to solve this case is almost a superhuman level in terms of how it's been unsolved for 40 years, and as soon as she gets involved within 6 months, it's done and dusted.
Well, let's not discredit Mikael. He was onto something. He was finding some stuff.
That's true.
But he was doing it the slow, old-fashioned way. And there's a scene in the movie that always cracks me up. It's when she's like sitting at his desk looking over his stuff, and he comes over to her and wants to show her something too, and he starts fiddling with the laptop, and he's like mumbling to himself. He's like, "All right, where is that? Okay, that's there. Oh, fuck, what the fuck is that? Okay, move that." And it's like, it's just a 15-second little clip, but it's so funny because it's like how we all feel watching old people deal with computers. Like, you can see in her face, she's like, "Is this fucking dude for real?" Like, this is the investigative journalist, and he's like futzing with his computer and can't get it to like do what he wants. Yeah, really inefficient. Yeah,
I think you can end up fast forwarding a lot of the after, like, because a lot of it is just like investigating and interviewing people, and you find out this. And one of the main siblings moved off to London and has just disavowed the family and hasn't spoken to anyone in like 20 years, and he goes and talks to her, and like a lot of it was cool to show how often he would follow up a lead and the lead would just go to a dead end, and then he'd be like not sure what to do, and then something else would come up and he would re-ask somebody a question, and it kind of showed what I really liked about it is it felt very realistic to what it would look like to try to figure out something like this.
Yeah, that's the grounded part of it. Is it felt like a pretty reasonable, realistic investigation into a murder.
And there are a lot of like throwaway comments that get brought back up of like, the reason this uncle wants to find his niece is because his sister, who's the actual mom, is such a piece of shit that she hates her kids, and after the dad died, like, she just wouldn't take care of them. And she gets shown up later and is like just such a fucking bitch and wants Michael Blomkvist to like fuck off. It's like, you know, after the old man has a stroke or falls over, he gets like kind of sick. And like more or less the family wants Michael gone, but like there's a bunch of, you can't tell who is on whose side. Everyone's against everybody. It's like, I had no idea how they were going to wrap it up. Cause like I didn't have any during watching this. It's like, I don't know who I would have thought what happened had I not remembered the ending the first time I watched it. I wish I could remember what it was like in the moment and be like, what do I think watching this movie is the outcome, you know? It's hard to know what that feels like anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, the movie does a great job of giving you only 2 or 3 people to really root for in this sea of other people that you just don't know anyone's motives, and you know the the web of distrust among the whole family is a really good setup for just leaving you completely in the dark and not having a clue of who's doing what.
I also want to talk about, as a fun and sad throwaway statement, is how much they talk shit about Nazis in this movie, and you're like, well, if only people thought that way today. And then also, there was something really humbling about seeing that Google.com website and being like, wow, technology, man. God, I miss old, like 2012. What a beautiful time to have been alive. Anyway.
Yeah. So Mikael meets Lisbeth. Yes, I will concede that it was like, she's superhero-esque where they're like, oh, you need a researcher? Let's hook you up with an Uber hacker that's got perfect memory. It's like, all right.
And is able to perfectly hack people's computers, like that type of movie, Hollywood stuff.
Which, you know, the flip side to that coin is what we've been talking about, like her terrible upbringing. She's extremely antisocial. Like, she has all these off-putting parts of her that make it so that she's not just a Superman, you know? She's more the Batman, I suppose. So they end up doing research together. They end up making a connection pretty quickly because, like I said, Mikael just treats her like shows her humanity, as you said, and that's something that's more than almost anyone in the entire movie has ever done for her so far. So she likes him, ends up having sex with him very quickly, which is surprising.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. This is something I don't know how I feel about Michael Blomkvist's infidelity. What am I don't understand. Is he a bad guy? Like, what? So in the beginning of the movie, it's said very quickly that basically him and the owner of the magazine that he works for more or less are hooking up. It ruined his marriage, but not her marriage for whatever reason. And they're still like hooking up.
Yeah, they still kiss and whatever.
And then Lisbeth, like, comes in and just, like, presents herself, and he's like, I don't know about this, and she's like, shut up, and he's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, she says, shut up.
I don't know. And, like, I don't know how, like, to me, I'm supposed to be, like, I don't know what the director wanted, like, what's the character thinking at that moment? Like, I don't know, I have a hard time even asking what I'm trying to articulate here, of just, like, it feels like I should be mad. Right? Because, like, this is going to end poorly because he's already in a thing with somebody else.
He's kind of a womanizer, yeah. But you could almost think maybe, you know, Lisbeth will be the, whatever the word is. Maybe she'll be the one that, like, hooks him.
You know what, Kyle? I want to propose a thought.
Let's hear it.
It's interesting about how, like, what he sells Lisbeth as to what a woman killer was, like, the phrase he used to, like, suck her in. And it's interesting he then is kind of I won't put in air quotes, womanizer, because he's not a bad guy. He does not treat her poorly, but he's certainly not faithful. He's not committed.
Yeah.
And that being, like, another way men, like, is kind of, like, are nasty towards women, but it's a different way. I don't know if that was more of just like a random parallel I thought of more than like an intentional parallel, but it's interesting that, like, you know, a man, this idea of a woman killer was what was used to kind of sway her in, and then another man's kind of negative trait of being a womanizer, like, also hurts her in the end. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's a cool thought parallel. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. You don't really understand because, yeah, he's married, cheats on his wife with this lady, then, but because that's kind of an open relationship, they can both have sex with whoever they want, but they are primarily together. So then Mikael ends up banging Lisbeth, and then the lead of this magazine company goes back to her husband at night, but then like her husband is fine with her being with Mikael at some points. Like, yeah, it's all very weird. It's a similar kind of web to the family, that.
And it feels like it's intentionally webbed that way, and I just don't know what the intention was. And it, like, maybe it's more clear in the novel, and I just didn't get it. But it feels like you don't set all of that up just to be like, I don't know, it just felt like it more interesting than if he was single. I don't know. I feel like there's something there that I'm not smart enough to understand.
What I was thinking about in the more recent time I saw this movie was, I think it might be more of a statement on Lisbeth and her naivety and her.
Yeah, because like, go ahead.
She has done research into his life. She knows who Mikael is. She knows that he cheated on his wife with the publisher of the owner of the magazine company he works for.
Millennium Magazine.
Yeah. So I think what is she called? The editor?
The deputy editor.
Editor in chief of Millennium Magazine. Blanc, this occasional lover. Yes.
Yeah.
So Lisbeth knows that he's not faithful. He cheated on his wife with this lady. So
that's a really good point, actually. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, which is something I have thought about more recently while watching it, because the ending, right, at this point, we've talked for about an hour about this movie, so we'll just cut to the ending, is basically like Lisbeth ends up going away to steal a bunch of money from the Wernerstrom.
Wernerstrom.
Yeah. It's not worth explaining, but basically, like, he's hooked up with the Russian mob and the Russian mafia or something, and so he has like literally billions of dollars in these offshore accounts, and Lisbeth, being the uber hacker that she is, ends up hacking into the accounts, but like, changing her identity and flying across the country and pretending to be like his assistant to move funds around, and then she ends up stealing all the money. But she disappears for a pretty long time, like many months, and when she comes back, she ends up buying something really expensive. It's like a super nice jacket for Mikael, and she shows up at his workplace to give it to him, but she's kind of off to the side, and she sees Mikael walk out of the building with the editor-in-chief lady, and they're holding hands, and they get into a car together and drive off, and it like absolutely breaks her heart, because she finally feels like she loves someone and made a connection with someone, and she's gonna give him this really sweet gift, and he ends up doing exactly what we all knew he was going to do, is just like go back to his little thing over there. Lisbeth was just a fling for him.
He has a life, like, all established.
Yeah, exactly. So he returns to his life, but Lisbeth, in her naivete, is thinking that maybe we can be something, but she kind of should have known better. And so she ends up throwing the jacket into the garbage and riding off into the distance on her motorcycle. And that's how the movie ends. It's very bittersweet.
And so I have two thoughts. One is that, like, I think your naivete is like, she never talked to him about this stuff. She just assumed he was on the same page as her.
Yes.
And I think it's partially because she's so afraid to be vulnerable, and this will be like, so at the end I get so frustrated. I'm like, this is so sad because you're going to use this as a justification to be a shittier person, when in reality you should have just talked to him a single time, which I know is the intention. Like, it's supposed to make you feel that way.
Yeah.
I also like that she clearly wrote a letter with some.
Yes.
What kind of intent in there? You never know. But I also think that she has daddy issues, and that she almost has this father. So it's a fucked up, like, I'm attracted to, because like he's in his mid 40s and she's in her early 20s. So this is like, in theory, you could point as like a daddy issue thing. And even to parallel it, the villains of the movie have a lot of incestuous, like, weird
raping of this daughter.
Yeah, so that's something.
Skipped over the murder.
We skipped over the actual resolution of the story. Because in a
lot of ways,
but we're trying to wrap up Lisbeth's kind of arc.
What I want to say, actually, what I think is really interesting about this movie is it's more or less a movie about her and like what she was doing at this point in her life. And this point of her life, this mystery happened. So it's like you kind of know what she was doing before and after, because the story is more interested in her than Michael. And at the end, you can almost tell, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, he was just there to help solve this mystery because Lisbeth was going to end up being involved. And the narration, like, the point of view is caring more about her story by the end. So it kind of makes sense that it's done that way.
It's called The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, after all.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah. So I think, circle it back a little bit, reiterate. Yeah, it's because this movie is about her, it's mostly from her perspective. Yeah, him being a womanizer isn't necessarily a comment on him as a character. It's more about her and her ignorance and her how naive she actually is because she's still young and, speaking, communicating your feelings for someone with just sex is not going to get you what you need, which is kind of what she does. In order to demonstrate that she feels comfortable with Mikael, she doesn't speak any words. She walks into a room, gets naked in front of him, and just has sex with him. And because he's a womanizer, he's like, okay, sure. Yeah, let's have sex. But to her, she's like, I'm telling you something here. But because he doesn't know her like that, he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
So it's almost a miscommunication of sex, but it's also to show that, like, yeah, they're getting along. And, like, the next morning, she's made him toast. It's very cute. And she says, I like working with you. And without skipping a beat, he looks at her and says, I like working with you, too. He almost interrupts her to say it. It's like, it's very cute. And they do have great rapport and they're very sweet. But, in Mikael's mind, he very well could be seeing her as, now this is the second girl that I get to just kind of like go be with occasionally if I'm feeling
this is
my
fun.
mood is different. I'll go hang out with Lisbeth one weekend and then I'll go hang out with my other lady the next weekend, and like, so yeah, you kind of get you yeah, I guess both perspectives are pretty covered there when you actually think about it. You just don't.
It's tragic, and it's just like, and I think it's a realistic. It's a realistic end for fucked up characters, and it's a justification for them to go, in their second act, downward spiral. You know what I mean? Like, I think story-wise it makes sense. But if this is like, you never get a single follow-up afterwards, it's just kind of a gut punch because, like, it is sad for her for no reason. Like, it's just like misery upon misery, and it's rough.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's
tough. More tragedy, but I do see it. You even touched on it too. I do see it as a bit of her fault. She just, granted, she probably was never taught how to communicate her emotions and her feelings, but she knows his background. She could have said something to him to, like, make him understand, but she didn't. And that's what the letter was for, right? She wrote him this letter probably to convey her feelings, but...
And I was actually going to point out all that shit she does to take down Wangy Dangy guy is for him.
True.
Like, that's the only reason she's doing any of it, and that is her way of showing that, like, she loves him or whatever.
The thing is, Mikael doesn't know what she's doing. She says, I need to borrow money from you. I can't tell you what it's for, but you will get it back. And he just says, okay. And another very sweet moment, and she's, like, shocked. She's taken aback, and she goes, okay. She expected to probably have a fight or an argument or persuade him, but he just literally says, okay, and he trusts her. That's another thing, too. Trust is a huge component in this movie, and the fact that Mikael trusts her very quickly and honestly, and she's surprised by it. So, really, kind of the moral here is that Mikael, just simply by treating her with humanity and trust, is something she has never experienced before, and it amplifies her feelings for him, where from Mikael's perspective... he's just treating her like a person. He's treating her like you would a friend. Any friend would treat a friend like that. But to her, it's so new and piercing. She doesn't. She's like, I like this. Fuck, I'm in love with this guy. Oh my god. But to him, he's like, no. I mean, I trust you. You're a good person, and I believe you. And like,
the movie is also shown multiple times. Where every time she has asked for money, the follow up is why. This is the first time.
True. Good point.
Like, I just thought about that. Even when one time it was like, she's like, I need money, and she's like, so I can eat. like for him, she's like, I need it for an investment. He's like, all right. Like, oh, she's so, even the movie establishes she has to justify everything she does to everyone else in positions of power. This one doesn't. It's just kind of, yeah, you, like, in a lot of ways, I didn't expect the last 2 minutes just kind of really shocked me. I didn't think it was going to end that way. But at the same time, how else is it going to end? Like, it's obvious he was not going to, like, throw his life away for this girl.
Yeah, that's something, too, is she has this, because they were on this island together, she has this kind of, this, like, separate little insulated holiday life with Mikkel, and it's kind of, it makes kind of, what am I trying to say? They're basically on holiday in the separate place, and it makes you forget that Mikkel has a life already. This is just something he's doing for now. He's gonna go back to his life, and Lisbeth doesn't quite make that connection. And
I mean, he's even had sex with a different girl in the room they had sex in. You know, like that's what's even funnier is like his editor-in-chief came and visited him one night,
and they
so they had sex. Like it's implied, they don't show it, but like. And so like even Elizabeth doesn't realize that she's not even the only woman who's had sex with this guy in this like cabin.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. So that makes me appreciate the ending more now that I see it kind of like this tragedy of like, you know, it isn't her fault, but at the same time, yeah, it is your fault. Like I can't blame you, but if you took any other action, you would have had a good ending. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. Instead of asking and like giving him the opportunity that she would want to maybe like she's just so quick to burn any bridge because like being vulnerable is just like too hard for her. And I think that's really tragic.
Yes, it is tragic. And then she is vulnerable for Mikkel and then gets burned immediately. But it's because of like the way she was vulnerable. She didn't do it in a normal way. Like phone called him first and was like, "Hey, can we get together for coffee?" And then hand him his present. It's like she tries to surprise him.
Yeah, showing up to a surprise. Yeah. Going to someone's birthday party you weren't invited to, and then being told, "Hey, you can't come in," and then getting so furious and upset about it. It's like, well, I don't know what you like. This is the outcome that was destined to happen. Whether or not it's because you like that person, that's okay. But like, they have their old friends. You just moved in anyway. I want to talk about the other part that I struggled with, which was trying to keep up with the research, like, so when Lisbeth is in the, like, company records room where she could just, like, read endless articles, it's like the movie was highlighting phrases and showing me things. I'm like, I don't understand what is happening. And the movie does eventually, like, do a good job of when they confront the murderer, which I think that whole sequence is so good, so tense the whole time.
Yes.
I'm excited to talk about that. But that was my problem with, like, it's like, the movie is telling me right now, showing me things that I should be like, oh my God, but I don't know what I'm, like when I read the words, I'm like,
Yeah. So I want to comment on this specifically. It wasn't until this last most recent watch, I remember, again, talking to Lauren specifically about this. It's crazy. We've seen this movie a dozen times, but we always have to talk about it afterwards. I was telling her, I finally understood what this records office scene was. Which is hilarious to think about because even you didn't understand, but yet you're pulled in. You're watching this. You're like, the way it's edited, the music, the way she's moving around, the minimal action. You're like, oh, they're figuring stuff out. Oh, this is exciting. And you're like,
this is the exact moment when I was like, wow, this is a research movie, and I'm here for it. This is the exact sequence.
At the same time, like you just admitted, you're not even understanding what we're being shown and pointed out, but you know they're solving it, and it's exciting. This most recent time, after a dozen watches, I finally was like, holy fuck, I actually understand what I was seeing.
That I'm so jealous. So what is it?
Yeah, what's happening is this. They have essentially pinpointed that his name is Gottfried. He is the son of the main uncle guy, right? Or nephew. Fuck.
So are you talking about Martin?
No, I'm talking Martin's dad, which is Godfrey.
Martin's dad would be the uncle's brother. It would be his brother.
The uncle's brother. Okay, so the uncle, the main guy who like runs the whole company, his brother's name is Martin. Martin's daughter is Harriet, whose name we've never said yet. Harriet is the one who died / disappeared, and they're trying to investigate. His daughter is Harriet. So her dad is God, I hope we're not screwing up these relationships, but there's so many uncles and brothers.
So Martin
and whatever.
is her brother.
Martin
I don't know
is
the
her
name.
brother. Okay,
Yes.
and then their dad is whose name I just said 5 times and forgot now.
Gottfried or something.
Gottfried, yes. So this research section is showing all of the locations that they're opening up new factories paired with where murders took place in the way that they have, because serial killers leave patterns. So they've figured out the pattern of the serial killer, and they're putting together everywhere there has been a serial killing of one of these women in a biblical way is in the same spot that a new factory is opening at the same time that Gottfried has been there. That's what they're showing with the maps and the names, is they're putting together this woman was murdered horribly in this spot at this time where a new factory was opening up where Gottfried was visiting. And they're putting that together, and they find like a dozen locations where Gottfried was at every single one of them at the time of the murder, opening up a new factory. So they're figuring out, like, concretely that Gottfried is basically the one who's been killing all of these women. The last one, though, this last woman who was killed, which I believe is Harriet on their list, whatever.
Yeah.
It took place after Gottfried died. So that is the mystery. They're like, okay, Gottfried clearly killed all these women in all these places, but this one doesn't make sense because Gottfried is already dead now.
Yeah, okay.
So this is what lets you... And at the same time, Mikkel is going against his better instinct and like basically going to have a drink with Martin, but at this point he kind of suspects Martin is actually a serial killer. And it turns out he's correct. So what happened is Gottfried is the father of Martin and Harriet. Harriet dies/disappears, and Gottfried has been murdering, he's a serial killer, a killer of women, and he's been bragging and whatever. However, he ends up dying. They think he falls off the dock drunk and drowns. And Martin now took over for Gottfried. Like father, like son. Son now becomes womanizer, sexual assaultist, serial killer. So at this point, then Mikkel gets captured by Martin because Mikkel is sort of privately... At this point, Lisbeth is at the research center at the library, like looking at all these old records, while Mikkel is back at their little, their little hut, and he's figuring stuff out, and he ends up with pictures deducing that Martin is the one that is in a certain spot at a certain point, and it basically implies that Martin is a killer. So Mikkel goes up and sneaks up to Martin's house and is investigating because Martin is gone wherever. But of course, while Mikkel is there sneaking around his house trying to find clues, Martin shows up and ends up catching Mikkel and basically bringing him into his like super secret locked basement where he's been murdering all these women. And this is a really cool scene.
What I did love was that, and Martin brings this up when he asks, so he sees Blomkvist kind of like slide down a hill, leaving the house, and he's like, "Oh, hey, do you want to come in for a drink?" And instead of being like, "No, I'm gonna go home," Blomkvist was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come in for a drink," because I was just walking around. He was so worried about like being suspicious that he walks into the place that he's certain is a rapist murderer's home.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, it gets brought up when we talk about the scene in detail, but I'll let you're much better at describing scenes, so I'll let you lead into what is, I think, the most tense sequence in the whole film.
Yeah, so yeah, that is what happens. Mikkel tries to sneak away, and as he's sneaking away, he ends up slipping and falling and making a bit of a noise, and that's when Martin is outside and he looks into the woods and sees Mikkel fall. And that's kind of how Mikkel gets caught, because he ends up slipping and Martin sees him. And so, yeah, he says, hey, why don't you come on in for a drink? And of course, with the music and the way the scene is filmed and the tension between the characters, you both know that both of them are aware of something. Like, Martin knows that Mikkel was fishing around and probably figured it out, and Mikkel knows that Martin probably knows. But they're they're both just like, or Mikkel's mostly on edge. Martin's very cool, but you can see now, like, oh god, he's kind of turned into killer mode here. He's definitely going to do something.
And so, up until this point, he's been very encouraging of like, no, keep looking, keep researching.
Very nice. Yeah.
So like this is kind of a dark turn for the audience too.
Yeah. So
it was a surprise for me when I saw it was him. I did not expect it when I first watched it.
You really don't, because like you said, Martin has been extremely encouraging the whole time. Like, even when there's strife with the lawyer not wanting to give them access to stuff, Martin is like, hey, he was brought here for a reason. Give him what he needs. Let him figure this out. So he's been a champion for Lisbeth and Mikkel. So you wouldn't expect that it's him that's the killer of Harriet, and a continued serial killer of women in general. So yeah, Mikkel ends up getting caught by him, and Martin, Mikkel is basically, he gets knocked out by some gas, and then he wakes up, strung up. He's got this like neck brace mechanism on that's kind of holding him in place, and his hands are tied behind his back, and he's kind of like hanging in this giant white tiled shower looking area where he kills people and drains them, and it's it's just like a torture den, a murder den. And Martin, as Taylor was commenting before, makes a comment of like, it's amazing that people will ignore their instinct when they know something bad is going to happen, but they're so afraid of leaving a bad impression, or I can't remember the exact phrase he uses.
Disrespecting, something. It's not
along
disrespecting. Those lines.
It's But basically, he implies that like, it's amazing. You knew that I was going to kill you, but because you were so afraid to say no to me being nice, like, you ended up going against your gut.
I don't know. It's going to drive me nuts. Keep going. Ignore me.
It's going to drive me nuts, too, because I had the word when we were talking about it earlier, and now I've lost it. It has to do with, like, making an impression or not wanting to offend somebody, or maybe it is the word offend. You're so afraid to not like to offend somebody that you'll go against your gut and get yourself into a murderer's basement. Mm-hmm. So he ends up, basically asking, so what'd you find out about Harriet?
Kyle, I have the quote.
What is it?
It's hard to believe that the fear of offending could be stronger than the fear of pain, but you know what? It is.
Fear of offending. There is the word. Fear of offending. Right. Yeah, that's what he says. So, he ends up asking Mikkel, Mikkel says something kind of taunting. He's like, oh yeah, did you string up Harriet like this when he says something like, did you string up Harriet like this? And he kind of runs up to Michael and grabs him by the throat and chokes him. And he's like, what happened to her? Tell me, what did you find out about Harriet? And then Michael's like, you killed her. And then Martin looks like disgusted. He looks at Mikkel. He's like, God, you are fucking useless, and like lets him go. And basically then, opens up his shirt, starts to like take the knife to him, starts to unbutton his pants, and he stops, and he's like, man, I've never had a man down here before. This is strange. And right as he's about to kind of, get Mikkel naked and do the deed that he's been doing, Lisbeth shows up behind. She goes, hey.
Hold on, real quick, before that, he implies that he's had to jerk off his dad.
Yes. He says,
I think there's a lot of like weird, the dad was raping the daughter.
Harriet, yes.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of that stuff. It's like, no wonder they're all fucking so insane.
Oh yeah.
But like the first time watching that, I don't think it wasn't as clear to me when he was talking about like the way he was talking about this genitalia and stuff. Is like, oh, he's talking about like what he used to do for his dad because that was his duty. And like, that's what he's talking about. Okay,
right. He mentioned something. Yeah, he's like, I've never had a man down here before. I don't know what to do with that kind of stuff. He's like, I don't have much experience with that except for my father. That was me and Harriet's duty. It's a very quick, subtle line, but implies right away like, oh, their dad was having them. I don't know. It's disgusting and creepy, and Harriet was for sure raped by Gottfried, her dad, and then when Gottfried disappeared, Martin started raping her and just took Gottfried's place. So, then he's about to stab Mikkel, kind of, and like getting ready to, he's starting to do his routine, and Lisbeth shows up and says, hey, and Martin turns around and he bashes her. She bashes him across the face with a golf club. again, just horribly brutal, and like shatters his jaw and teeth go flying, and you hear them clink off the tile, and how hard he falls. Like, I don't know if they got a stuntman to do that or how they masked that scene, but like the same thing happens earlier when Lisbeth tases her guardian. Like, the way that they fall on the ground, just 100% pure dead weight. Like, I don't know if if it's CGI or stuntmen that are amazing or what, but it's like, it's so realistic. It's so brutal. So yeah, she bashes him across the face and he falls down. He kind of like, whoa, is like shocked, but gets up and starts running away because at this point, Lisbeth has run to Mikael and is lowering him and like trying to, because he's got a plastic bag over his head. So she's trying to like make sure he's still alive. And, you know, Martin runs out of the house and Lisbeth asks Mikael if can I kill him? And Mikael says yes. And then so she has a gun and runs and chases him. And there's a little bit of a chase scene where they're going across the bridge and she kind of jukes him and he flies off the road, runs into a giant propane gas tank for a gas station or something. Not a gas station, it's like a convenience store. I don't know. It's a giant propane tank thing and it blows up and he dies.
I was a little surprised they let him go the way he does when he was almost worse than he's worse than the
yes
Guardian, but he got off way worse.
A serial rapist murderer, whereas the Guardian is just a serial rapist, apparently.
Yeah.
So yeah, Martin ends up dying, and they because of the way the scene devolves, I should say, you still don't know what happened to Harriet, because at this point, all of their research and their evidence has led them to believe that Martin killed Harriet. But Martin's reaction to the way Michael says you killed her, Mikael even talks about this to Lisbeth. He's like, he was mad at me for not knowing what happened to Harriet. I don't think he killed her. So now again, they're like, fuck, well, what actually happened to her? They figure out, that she actually did escape. She ended up hiding in the trunk of her sister's car while they drove across the bridge. Even though there was cops everywhere and investigating because the sister was part of the family, they pretty much just let her go, trusting that she was fine. But in the trunk of the car was Harriet. Harriet knew she had to get away because she, it's also revealed, killed her dad. Gottfried was, one night was raping her as he usually does, but this time he had a belt around her neck and was basically trying to kill Harriet. And Harriet realized, like, holy shit, my dad is a murderer, and he was bragging to Harriet about the murders that he's committed while raping her, while trying to kill her. Harriet ends up escaping, running out to the dock and hiding, and like when Gottfried comes out to chase her, she's surprised, like ambushes him and hits him over the head with a big oar. And because he's drunk, he falls face first into the water, and that's how he drowns and dies. But everyone in the family just assumed he fell and drowned and died. They don't know that Harriet actually, like, knocked him unconscious and he died. However, when she does this, she looks back, and she sees Martin standing there staring, and basically she realizes I just replaced one evil for the next.
Yeah, so that's a line that I didn't appreciate. And then he raped her too. Like, I know, and she never says anything other than like this vague sense of like, I just replaced one monster with another.
Yes,
and like in one ways, I'm like, oh, so he was just mean. It's like, no, he just did the same things. I was just too stupid to piece that together when I first saw it.
Yeah, which is great motivation for her leaving. Like, she barely had the strength to fight off Gottfried and actually kill him, but he was a drunk and sloppy. Martin is calculated and smart and doesn't, is not an alcoholic, and he's young and strong, and so the implication there that if he took over for Gottfried, yeah, like there's no way she's going to be able to survive this. That's her motivation for running away. So she hides in the trunk of her sister's car. They drive off. Her sister also hates the family. It's not talked about too much, but they basically decide together that they're going to run away and go, and just try to like start a new life away from this horrible, torturous family. Turns out that the sister that helped Harriet escape ends up dying in a car accident. So Harriet then like takes her identity so that she can't be found. And so this whole time, yeah, they think Harriet died or disappeared because she's actually alive, and you see her get spoken to earlier in the movie. It's kind of revealed to be like a hidden identity. They talked to her earlier thinking she was the sister, but it turns out it's actually Harriet pretending to be the sister. Took her identity.
So it turns out that she wasn't dead, and she gets to reunite with her uncle Henrik.
Yes.
And like his reaction to seeing her alive, like I actually was brought to tears.
Me too.
He was so convinced she was dead, and he truly was like a good person the entire time. And,
he was.
Like, and she wasn't taunting him; she was sending him photos, and it's just like the only sweet moment in like the whole movie where there's no like bad, and then something happens. It's just like no, they reunite, and that's the end of that story. Is they killed the bad members of the family, and the two good ones reunite. Very sweet, and then then we explain kind of what happens. This is at like the 2-hour mark, and there's still like 30 minutes left at that point. And so that's where
they're reunited, and then it goes back to Mikael and Lisbeth kind of trying to go back to their normal lives, and Lisbeth orchestrating this identity swap to go off to the other country to steal money, and that's kind of how the movie ends up resolving. So, it's interesting that Harriet trying to send this message to her uncle that like, hey, it's still me, I'm still alive. It's just kind of a wink. He ends up interpreting it as a taunt from a murderer. So that was just an interesting kind of mixed message at the end there that you realize it's like, oh my God. So it was, she says like, I've been sending you those, like, have you been getting them? And it turns out he thought it was just the murderer taunting, but it was Harriet trying to tell him that she's okay and she's alive, but it was just misunderstood. So the good guys get reunited. Mikael and Lisbeth end up with a bit of a bittersweet ending, unfortunately. But that is the wrap up of the movie. I know we didn't talk too much, but the music is extremely good. It's more atmospheric and moody. It's not really like a soundtrack you can listen to, but Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor do an amazing job. Of course, that's part of what makes this movie so good. Is the music is really, really intense and strong and fits every scene perfectly. It's really good. We didn't talk too much about the technical aspects and whatever, but it's a Fincher movie. Like at this point, you just know it's amazing, and it's done in prime Fincher fashion. And then the acting, Rooney Mara is
the big takeaway. I think everyone else does a great job, but I don't know that he stood out. I just think it was very convincing. But Rooney Mara feels the most standout-ish amongst the group.
It was also cool to see Daniel Craig right in the middle peak of his James Bond career. Does this guy where he's just kind of a nerdy journalist who doesn't, is not physically imposing at all. He can't handle anybody. He like stumbles around and stuff. He's not good at everything. It was cool to see that juxtaposition at this point in his career, and he does it very believably. He does a phenomenal job too. So
that's why he's so good in Knives Out. Similar kind of thing.
Yeah, he's just
Knives Out is funny. Goofy dude.
You should watch Logan Lucky. That's another one. That was, I think, kind of after his James Bond career, but he plays like
I did see that.
Okay, that's a great
movie. Is it the NASCAR weird one?
Yeah, where the Logan family is planning a heist. Anyways.
Yes, that's a good one.
So Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It's become my Christmas time classic. 5 out of 5 for me. I just love this. Love the movie.
Yeah, I think at least 4 out of 5 for me now that we talked about some things of like, I couldn't decide how I felt about it because I was still thinking through. But I would recommend it to anybody. Just know that it's not a fun movie. Like in terms of like, I feel warm and fuzzy. It's a well-made movie that tells an interesting story and like it's very compelling start to finish.
Yes, well said. We'll end it at that. Thanks for listening, everybody. We're done.
I love you all. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.